Hi again everyone. In this video, I just want to go through the different question options that I've set for you, and just to give you a bit of insight in what kinds of ideas you can write about for each of these questions. Now, here's a selection of the questions. Now, you'll hopefully notice straight away that each of them begin in the exact same way. They each begin with this phrase, analyse how. Then they've got the writers' names. And then I've mentioned specifically how do they use language and structure. Now, this is something the exam board have recommended. They have recommended that us as teachers set you questions that allow you to meet the assessment objectives by asking you specifically to analyse, by asking you to explain that keyword how, and by mentioning specifically language and structure. We are doing as much as we can to get you to answer the question in the best way possible. So first of all, I want all the questions to be formatted in that way, and that just reminds you, encourages you to answer the question in the way that we've recommended. Now, as you can see, each question asks you to write about two texts. Now, in this question, you do not have to compare the two writers. You can write an essay about Wilfred Owen's Disabled, 3 paragraphs, and then write 3 paragraphs about Tony Harrison's The Bright Lights of Sarajevo straight after this. However, to access the higher marks on the mark scheme, it might be a good idea to compare. Now, you don't actually explicitly get any marks for this, but by comparing, you are showing more advanced thought. It means your essay will have more fluency. It will read better. It is quite abnormal to have an essay, I'm sure you'll agree, with both texts in it without there being comparison. So I recommend this. In order to get level 3 in level 4, and if you're not very confident with how you would compare and you're struggling to think of how you would do that, then it's absolutely okay not to compare. You can simply do, as I said, 3 paragraphs on one text, for example, on Still I Rise, and then 3 paragraphs on the second text, The Story of an Hour, 6 PEA style paragraphs overall with not one comparison sentence. That's absolutely fine. However, some of you I know who are hoping to access the top level on the mark scheme, level 5, will want to show a bit more perception. You will, I'm sure, as you plan your essay, will want to compare. So here are the choices. Number 1, analyse how Owen and Harrison use language and structure to present war in Disabled. Now, each question has what we call a focus. This is the theme, this is the idea that you are going to be focusing on. This is what each of your paragraphs should link back to. The helpful thing with this one is that war is a very general theme. You can write about lots of different things. You can write about how the characters have been devastated by war. You can write about how one person's been injured. You can write about how the people of Sarajevo have shown determination and resilience in fighting back from this. You can compare how both writers show a contrast in their poems. You can write about how war dehumanises people, for example. So the idea of war gives you that chance to write about many different things. It could be the sense of hope in The Bright Lights of Sarajevo and the lack of it in Disabled, for example, which would be a really nice comparison point and a really nice perceptive idea to analyse. The second one, analyse how Owen and Frost use language and structure to present their ideas in Disabled and Out. Once again, we have that phrase, analyse how. We have both writers, we have language and structure, and then we have this very, very generic and general phrase, their ideas. Now, there's lots of things to compare in Disabled and Out. We both poems have young men who are dreadfully injured. Disabled is about war. Robert Frost's poem could metaphorically be about youths dying in war needlessly. We've got the juxtaposition between the violence as opposed to, in Disabled, the joy and the freedom that man used to have. And in Out Out, we've got the beauty of the natural landscape juxtaposed against the horror of those actions. We've got loads to comment on between those two texts, but I couldn't quite find a way to come up with a specific idea. So I just used the phrase ideas, which is absolutely fine with the exampled. Now, two what I anticipate will be very popular texts. I think we analysed these two probably in the best detail in class, and the way that you are discussing these and sharing your ideas on these texts in particularly really impressed me. Still I Rise and Story of an Hour. How do they use language and structure to present an awakening from difficult circumstances? So we've got these two women, the voice of Still I Rise and the Mrs. Mallard of The Story of an Hour, how they have been awoken from difficult circumstances, how they have been in challenging circumstances, and how they now are pushing on through those, for example. Now, that is slightly a difficult way of putting it, so I've rewritten the question as this as well, so you can choose this one instead. It's essentially the same question. How do they present women who have been oppressed? So we've got one woman, an African-American woman who has been oppressed and her race has been oppressed in American history, against a woman who's been oppressed in marriage. We can write about how they've been oppressed, and we can write about how they are now feeling now they've been liberated from that. And then another option, analyse how both Angelou and Harrison use language and structure to present their ideas. Again, a very general question focus there. And then analyse how the writers use language and structure to present the characters of Out Out and Disabled. Now, this is a very simple question, a very general question again, present the characters. So you can say whatever you like about the characters of Out Out and Disabled. So hopefully there's a question there which hits the two texts that you want to write about. And hopefully there's a question there for you that makes sense. I've tried to hit all 5 texts and put them in different combinations that would work. However, if one of those question choices does not work for you, you can select your own. And it's quite simple to do this. There's 3 steps to follow. I want you to use the opening phrase, analyse how the writers use language and structure, to make sure that you're setting yourself a question in the right way. Think of your idea. This could be characters. This could be ideas. This could be oppression. It could be difficult circumstances. It could be war. It could be whatever it is that stands out to you about these poems. A nice general theme. And then obviously you've got to name the 2 texts at the end of your answer so we know specifically which ones you're writing about. So this is what I want you to do now for your task. I want you to read through all of the texts that we've studied, the 5 texts. I want you then to pick the question that you think suits you most. Now, I want you to pick your question based not off which question makes most sense to you, but I want you to base your question on which texts you feel most confident writing about. Which 2 texts stand out most to you? Which 2 texts do you feel most confident in analysing? Which texts make most sense to you? And then I want you to pick the question for those 2 texts. Or, if there isn't a question that suits those 2 texts, use these 3 steps to create one. What I'll ask you to do is let me know if you're setting your own question, and I can approve that question just to make sure it follows the criteria that's needed. Okay, so what I want you to do, spend 10 minutes reading through the 5 texts again, reading over your annotations in your anthology, picking the 2 that you feel most confident with, come back to these questions, pick which question suits you best, or create your own. The next video, the next task that I'm going to set for you is starting to do an overall plan, starting to gently plan the ideas that can go in this essay, and that's something you'll be finishing off in tomorrow's lesson as well.